Ja, herzlich willkommen zurück. Ich hoffe, es hat gut geschmeckt. Mir hat es geschmeckt, deswegen stehe ich auch jetzt erst auf der Bühne. Aber ich hatte leider trotzdem keinen Nachtisch. Ich hoffe, dass mir mein Mann, der jetzt netterweise auch noch gekommen ist, einen Nachtisch zur Seite legt. Ja, so, wir sind jetzt hier wieder und Sie haben sich natürlich auch alle in die Mitte gesetzt, macht man ja auch automatisch. Wir werden aber gleich einen Videovortrag hören. Und die Leinwände sind ja hier links und rechts von mir, deswegen Sie dürfen sich auch gerne ein bisschen zur Seite setzen, wenn Sie möchten. Dann werden Sie einfach den Vortrag gleich besser verfolgen können. Ich glaube, in den weiteren, je weiter hinten man sitzt, desto besser kann man sehen. Aber wenn man hier weit vorne sitzt, ist es ein bisschen schwierig. Ja, wir werden jetzt am Nachmittag 3 tolle Vorträge hören, immer zur vollen Stunde. In den Pausen können Sie natürlich wieder auf den Markt der Lösungen gehen und den Klischeefrei-Stand besuchen. Und jetzt gleich erfahren wir mehr zum Thema Geschlechter- und Klimagerechtigkeit im Vortrag von Alexandrina Satnoianu. Sie arbeitet am Europäischen Institut für Gleichstellungsfragen, kurz EIGE. Sicher kennen Sie auch den EIGE-Gleichstellungsindex, von dem hört man immer mal wieder etwas. Zuletzt hat der ja gezeigt, dass die Pandemie viele Frauen wieder in klassische Rollen gedrängt hat. Ich bin gespannt, ob wir gleich erfahren werden, ob sich das vielleicht ein bisschen geändert hat. Der Vortrag wird jetzt auf Englisch gehalten, deswegen können Sie sich gerne auch noch ein Übersetzungsgerät schnappen, wenn Sie da eine Übersetzung ins Deutsche benötigen. Und Sie können nach dem Vortrag Ihre Fragen stellen und das geht auf Deutsch oder auf Englisch, wie Sie sich da wohler fühlen. So, nun ist uns Alexandrina Satnoianu zugeschaltet mit Tackling Gender Stereotypes for a Green and Gender Equal Europe. Welcome, it's a pleasure to have you here as one of our speakers. Hello.
Hello. Good afternoon, everyone. Do you hear me well?
We are looking forward to your presentation.
So, do you hear me well? Can you confirm?
Yeah, we can hear you. Sorry, I didn't hear you, but everybody else heard you. Okay, we are looking forward.
Many thanks for the invite and happy first day of spring. I'm coming from Romania, and the 1st of March, how we call it, Marțișor, it's a big thing, and I hope it brings you all good energy and smiles. I am somehow I managed to sense a bit the atmosphere in the room. It was a great conference that I followed in the morning. There were many points that I will be also talking about throughout my presentation. I will be presenting the campaign, the information campaign that I'm coordinating at the European Institute for Gender Equality, which is called Towards a Green and Gender Equal Europe. And in this format, we also have a proposal of tackling gender stereotypes. So I'm looking forward to hearing your feedback at the end of the presentation. But what you will be hearing a lot from me is next slide, please, because the slides are not with me. So yes, bear with me. Next slide, please. For those of you who do not know much about the European Institute for Gender Equality, is the only EU agency focusing on gender equality, provides knowledge and expertise to address inequalities, primarily to policymakers at the EU level and the member states level, to support them taking this knowledge and expertise into account. And thus, we are supporting evidence-based policymaking with the overall aim of making equality between women and men a reality for all Europeans and beyond. Next slide, please. And of course, being an EU institution, we are supporting the implementation of gender equality strategy. And it's not for no reason that you see at the forefront of the strategy as a main priority an Europe free from violence and gender stereotypes, because gender stereotypes are the root cause of all inequalities. And if we manage to check them, then we can also talk about gender equal economy, gender balance in decision positions, integrating gender perspective into policy making, thus having gender mainstreaming, allocating funds for gender equality. So tackling gender stereotypes is really important for the EU and of course for the member states. And you could have also seen, maybe you are already aware of, that the European Commission is leading a campaign and gender stereotypes, talking primarily about career choices, work-life balance, decision making. Next slide, please. Is as regards the institute, our campaign towards a green and gender equal Europe has been launched last year and continues until June 2024. And you might be wondering why green and gender equal Europe. And with my next slide, I will be giving you a hint about it. So why gender equality is important for the Green Deal? And I think the reverse question, why Green Deal is important for the gender equality, is as relevant as well. Well, Europe committed to become the first climate neutral continent by 2050, and the Green Deal is the economic growth strategy that is leading us there. It is promising a sustainable future, but does this take where women and men are in the society? And that's why in this in a way futuristic visual that we had created part of the campaign, we are bringing in a mixed media approach the silhouettes of women, of a woman and of a man, to draw attention towards where women and men are standing, and make sure that in this green transition, in our quest for a sustainable future, indeed no one is left behind. If we are thinking about Green Deal targets, some of them are really as well futuristic. So imagine in 2035, you will be traveling for a conference abroad with a zero emissions aircraft. Because this is one of the Green Deal targets, to have zero emissions aircraft by 2035. But this level of innovation can only be powered by representation and diversity. So the climate revolution that we are all seeking needs to be taken into account more women and more underrepresented groups. Equally, a successful green transition requires all of us to play an active part. So we know that green transition means change, and gender stereotypes are the most resilient to change. So we each of us have a role to play in going beyond the existing limitation. And in our campaign, we are drawing attention towards policymakers. We want action against gender stereotypes at societal level. But I think each of us can have a role to play in tackling gender stereotypes at individual level. Next slide, please. So that's why in our campaign, we've identified 3 steps. First, listen to the evidence. And the Gender Equality Index shows the link between existing gender and intersectional inequalities and the green transition. And I will be talking about the Gender Equality Index in the following slide. Then this is the connection between Green Deal, green transition, and gender equality is for the very first time in the focus of the European Institute for Gender Equality. We have raised some questions. We have found some results. We have some research, some findings that we are presenting. Nevertheless, much more research needs to be done. So we are inviting all policymakers, but the whole society at large, to engage in conversations with us. And we are having conferences and webinars. So please follow our social media channels and stay in touch with us and raise your questions. Of course, after the presentation, we will be having also time to engage in conversation. But the most important, I would want to go, yes, back to action. The most important is that the Institute develops tools and good practices that help take this impact, the gendered impact of climate change and climate action into account. And this is just by taking this gender perspective of climate change and climate action into account, this is how we actually ensure that no one is left behind. Next, yes. I was talking about the Gender Equality Index, and this is a piece of research that we have published last year, where we have taken an in-depth look at how the green transition in transport and energy connects with gender equality. So this is within our campaign, step one, the evidence. So what did we find out? That the gender care gap is shrinking, but not because men are shouldering more of the care work, because women are actually doing less. So much more of the work is externalized. For the first time in 10 years, the number of women in parliament and women on boards has converged at 33%. We are not yet in the gender balance zone, so much more work needs to be done. We have actually launched the Gender Equality Index in 2013, and we can look back and see which are the trends. And unfortunately, the labor market, and I'm talking at the EU level, on an average, remains as gender segregated today as it was 10 years ago. But the green transition will not only create a demand for STEM skills, it also creates a demand for care sectors where it is currently a shortage of people. And one more thing I would like to add here in the care sector, since we are talking about climate adaptation, care, health, education are really the backbone of the society, and they are really important in the climate adaptation process. Therefore, they have to be taken more seriously into account. And I've also heard conversation about this. They have to be brought up at the level of importance that the green sectors or the technical sectors have. Next slide, please. For those of you who do not know about the Gender Equality Index, it's a composite indicator that the European Institute for Gender Equality, as I've mentioned, computes it since 2013. In the beginning, it was launched every 2 years. And in the last years, we are releasing a new edition of the index on a yearly basis. It calculates a score for gender equality, which ranges from 1 full inequality to 100 equality. And in the graph, you see that we are at the historically high 70.2 score for the EU average. And you can see also who are the top countries and who are the 3 countries that are ranked the last. I'm coming from Romania, and it's really a pity to see Romania last in the index. Majority of you coming from Germany, you see that you're a bit above the EU average, but for all the countries, there is still room for improvement. Next. Yes, and I would like now to focus more on the domain of work. We've seen in the index that segregation has not changed. So, unfortunately, the stereotypical expectations regarding women and men are still very prevalent. And we have not seen new data. We do not have a new Eurobarometer, but the one on gender equality from 2017 says that 47% of men and 41% of women still expect that men's primary role should be that of breadwinner, the one that earns money. And when it comes to women, 44% of women and 43% of men consider that women's primary role is that of a caregiver, of taking care of her house and family. And this really can be seen on the labor market, which we've seen the index shows it remains as segregated as it was 10 years ago. And I want to show you some more to go a bit deeper into the results that we have for the domain of work. Next. Yes, we've seen that employment for women has increased, but this did not challenge segregation at all. The employment for men, at least in health education and social work activities, remain as low. Next slide. And if we are to look at so-called extremes, the STEAM areas in comparison to education, health, and well-being areas, we've seen that the employment of women in these sectors at the EU level in the STEAM sector has increased, but for men in care, education, health, well-being sector did not increase, which means this is a much more difficult stereotype to tackle. And I've heard discussions about why is it happen, and we know that these are not education, health, well-being. These are not sectors that are well paid, and it's a call for action to all the policymakers to have a better look at the sustainability of these sectors because they need more employees, and if they are not able to attract men, these sectors might not be sustainable. Next slide, please. We see that the care sector is not attractive for young men. Only 7% are from the age group 15 to 24 are working in the field, and we have a much larger group of 65 plus men working in the field, but this will be retiring soon. So then, as I said, there is a sustainability issue with the care sector. So big call to action with the next anti-gender stereotypes campaigns and affirmative actions. They need to target and attract more men in the sector. Next slide, please. I've mentioned, yes, it's okay. I've mentioned that our gender equality index, besides calculating the scores, the gender equality scores, at the EU level, per countries and per domains. I think there was one slide that we've missed, but if you are going online, the index has an interactive interface, and you can have a look at all its domains. And I'm talking here about work, knowledge, health, power, time, and then and money, and then there are two other domains, violence, which do not contribute to the overall score of the index, and intersecting inequalities, because in each of these domains we want to also have a bit of an in-depth look and see how these inequalities varies with age, with level of education, country of birth, family status, and disability. So this is what the index is offering, a really good picture of where we are in terms of gender gaps, which reflects gender stereotypes in the EU and in each member state. So besides having published the gender equality scores for each of the countries with in-depth analysis for the domains with intersectionality approach. The index of last year also had a thematic focus. So it looked at how the green transition affects transport and energy. And it tells us that there is in this industry quite a bit of disbalance. Only 22% of transport workers are women. Employment, as you can see in the graphics, varies with the sector. Persistent gender segregation, also not only horizontal in the sector, but also vertical. So we do not find many women in top position. Difficult working conditions and poor work-life balance also raise questions in regards to the sustainability of this industry. And I just want to maybe draw attention to some of the sectors here. With the water transport, it's not on the graph, although on average 22% are women working in the sectors. If we are talking about really technical specific positions, also with decision-making responsibility, that of a ship captain, it's at 3%. I don't think there is any other more segregated profession than this one of being a ship captain. When we are looking at air transport, we see that 40% are women working in the field, but they are also in support, in administration, operation, logistics, communication, not so much pilots. And I know for sure, this my daughter, my older daughter is studying to become a pilot. I've looked for this data, and worldwide, because we do not have data at the EU level, there are only 6% women pilots, which surprisingly, it's even less than women astronauts that sits at 11%. So when we are talking about combating gender stereotypes, I think this graph here shows that we have a lot of more work to do. It's also on us. If we are thinking about reskilling, upskilling, also on policymakers to offer us opportunities, also for the schools, the media, to encourage and empower girls to go and young women to go in this direction, but also for policymakers to really take affirmative actions and make sure that the targeted actions produce results. So next slide, please. When colleagues, research colleagues have had a look at the index results, at the index thematic focus, they in connection to the energy and transport, they had a look at attitudes and behaviors in relation to climate change and climate mitigation. They had a look at use of energy and transport, what's the employment rate and decision-making levels. And here on the screen, we see how gender plays a role in green mobility. And we have on the graph the percentages of women and men that are using different means of transport. And the data shows us that there is still a persistent reliance on cars, especially for men and high earners. And this is a challenge for the green transition. Only 22% of women and 19% of men opt for low carbon emission transport daily. Maybe more would want to use, and even from those who are using a car, maybe would want to use electric or hybrid vehicles, yet economic barriers affect the uptake of green mobility options. Next slide, please. Now, talking about women in the green transition towards cleaner energy, what do we know? That overall, only 24% are women employed in the EU energy sector. Again, here, gender stereotypes, gender biases, pay disparities are obstacles for greater representation of women, especially in management roles. When it comes to renewable energy, we see that there is a high, or at least a higher interest from women. And globally, we have 32% the share of women working full time in this sector. Next slide. As I said, with a thematic focus on the green transition in energy and transport, we also had a look at decision making. So what do we know? What does the data shows us? And we've published a statistical note called Gender Balance in the European Green Deal that you can also find on our website and download. It shows that more women and diverse representation in the decision-making process is critical if we want to have women needs priorities taken into account. Then we have to have more women represented in decision-making position, and even go beyond and have a space for women experts to voice their concerns. Unfortunately, fewer than 1 in 3 senior ministers responsible for the policy areas in the Green Deal are women. Only 2 out of the 8 areas, also in the Green Deal, have reached gender balance. And we will see with the next slide that is in the areas of energy and climate. So this is at the EU level, the share of women senior ministers responsible for the areas of for the 8 areas of the Green Deal. And in the gender balance zone, we only have climate and energy. The most segregated areas in which women are lacking in such a top position remain transport and agriculture. And I guess this raises some questions on whether we will be soon having safer and more sustainable transport. Next slide. Within our campaign, taking the evidence, the body of evidence that we have produced into account, we've invited policy makers, leaders at all levels, even society levels, to engage with us and be vocal about taking in gender perspective in tackling climate change. And we have online a series of such video statements that we have received. The most recent ones are from the Slovenian president. We have here the director of CINEA, which is an EU agency responsible for investments in the area of Green Deal. And for the next 10 years, the Green Deal allocates 1 trillion euros for investment. So I think it's quite important to have a woman in the lead of such a strong agency. Then also you have here a member of European Parliament, Alice Kuhnke, who herself has initiated a report in which draws attention towards how energy poverty has a gender dimension, since it affects women more. And this, of course, are just a few examples. You can go on our campaign website and find inspiration for gender and climate action. And we are at any point waiting for your 3 steps forward on how you see a gender perspective integrated in climate policy and climate action. Next slide, please. And the moment has come because we are presenting findings, we are discussing, but then we have to take action. The gender gaps that the Gender Equality Index present will not close by themselves. Those require targeted adaptation measures, because we are talking about a green transition. We are talking about how the climate change is impacting us and how we have to adapt. We have an EU strategy on climate adaptation, and in order to make sure that in this process, as we've seen at the beginning, no one is left behind, the the adaptation measures, they have to be targeted. They have to be taken into account existing inequalities and support certain groups of women and men that might be left behind because they don't start from a equal playing field. Next slide. So, in terms of action, we know that the impacts of climate change are not gender neutral, so allocation of funds should not be either. And this is precisely the moment when EIGE's toolkits come in handy, because they help public authorities keep in mind the different needs of women and men throughout implementation of EU-funded projects. And I'm only giving here the gender budgeting toolkit that is a step-by-step tool that can be taken into account, used in the implementation of EU funds to make sure from the very beginning, especially EU funds in the area of Green Deal, to make sure from the very beginning that such climate action targets, they are paired, they are connected with gender equality targets. So we take the opportunity of having funds for green projects, and in this implementation of the green projects, we make sure that also gender equality objectives are reached. And this would be the double mainstreaming approach. Next slide. Because many of you come from education sector, I just want to give an example of another toolkit. With the introduction of the Horizon Europe, European Commission made gender equality plans a requirement for participation in this research program. And we know that research is paramount in this green transition process, because otherwise we will not be able to identify those innovative solutions that we are so much relying on. So research is really important, and it's another opportunity to tackle any gender stereotypes and segregation that the sector is still confronted with. So if you want to know more about the reasons for promoting gender equality and its potential benefits, you can check out our GEAR tool, in short, from Gender Equality in Academia and Research, again on our website. Next slide. And just to sum up, because I think it was a lot, yet there is no possible successful climate action and no sustainable future without gender equality. Gender equality is actually speeding up the process of climate adaptation, and together they represent our future. And we know that climate change is already a fact. Depending how you're looking at it, it can very well be a race against time, and gender equality is part of the solution. The impacts of climate change are not gender neutral. Climate change and climate policy and climate action affect women and men differently. Also, because women are confronted with structural inequalities, and they do not have equal access to resources, to knowledge, to decision making possibilities and positions. And this is a situation that needs to be addressed. So climate action should not be gender neutral either. as we've talked, representation and diversity are really needed. It's the only way to foster innovation and boost this climate revolution that we need. And this is what I had to say in connection to our 3 Steps Forward campaign towards a green and gender equal Europe. And I hope it inspires you to bring forward your 3 steps forward. From my point of view, when we started the campaign, I've also thought what it is the action that I would be willing to take. Number 1 would be working on this campaign. Number 2 would be empowering girls to think they have the skills, the right, and the confidence for a STEM career. I'm a big supporter of girls in STEM. And my third commitment was for my little one, my youngest daughter, to run a STEAM club at her school for herself and her classmates. So I think, yes, there is a big responsibility on the policymakers, on the public authorities to take affirmative action and tackle gender stereotypes. And we are providing them with the evidence, with a space for dialogue, and with the tools, expertise, knowledge to take action. But I think there is also a role for each of us to play. So I want to thank you for bearing with me through the presentation, and I'm really looking forward to your questions. The next slide is with our contact. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Alexandrina. Yeah, are there any questions? Gerne auf Deutsch oder auf Englisch, wie Sie sich wohlfühlen. Ja, hier vorne ist eine Frage. Es kommt direkt ein Mikrofon.
Thank you so much. Annika Laudin from the Center for Feminist Artificial Intelligence. My question regards AI and sustainability. We know that environmental stability is a huge issue for AI. One ChatGPT search uses about half a bottle of water. And in terms of social sustainability, we know that diversity and inclusion are also important topics. So my question is, how important is AI for your work? What role does it play? Thank you.
Thank you for your question. Do you want me to answer questions one by one?
I think this
Because
makes sense. Yeah, one by one would be perfect. Thank you.
Yes. We have actually looked into the artificial intelligence, and the Institute published a report, if I'm not mistaken, 2 years ago, because since we know that overall in the ICT development, we only have 19% women, and when it comes to the AI development, the percentage of women is even lower. It comes with a huge bias, its development, and it's not necessarily targeted towards developing projects that are in support of women interests and priorities. So yes, from this point of view, AI development is not really representative. It requires here some affirmative action to have more women working in the AI field. And when it comes to the resources that it's using, this is something for sure we will have to look into, because AI is yet another reality that we are faced with. And if we are putting it in the sustainability framework, it has to be thoroughly analyzed. So this is a very important point you are raising. I'm sure that I can pass it further to my research colleagues for them to take it into account. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Gibt es weitere Fragen im Publikum? Hier, ja, gerne.
Hi, Luka Jelic from the Federal Institute for Vocational Education and Training in Germany, the institute with one of the longest names I know. I have a question. So first of all, thank you so much for making clear how gender equality and the green transition are interlinked. My question is directed rather at the concept of gender. Throughout your presentation, I sort of had the impression that of gender as a binary concept, and I would be interested to hear how concepts of gender fluidity might be addressed in your institution. Yeah, I think that's the question.
Yeah, it's a very relevant question. Thank you so much for raising it. You've seen that it's in our mandate that we should be making gender equality a reality for women and men. And we, of course, are bound to the mandate that we are given. Nevertheless, there are really in-depth discussion within the Institute on how we could be going beyond the binary. There is another aspect we are taking into account when it comes to sex disaggregated data. We are again bound to working with sex disaggregated data because it's it's the type of data that is offered at the moment. Nevertheless, we are discussing with statistical institutes, with Eurostat, about going beyond the sex disaggregated data and talking about gender disaggregated data. So these are very, very relevant points, and I hope that you will be engaging in these conversations with us not only on the climate action topic, but on this topic as well. Thank you.
Thank you. Noch eine letzte Frage würde ich dran nehmen mit Blick auf die Uhr. Wer möchte noch? Ja, hier vorne.
So if you're saying that it would be nice to have more female pilots or to have more female captains, but can you, with a good conscience, advise that to a young woman to become a captain or to become a pilot, or wouldn't that be against her interests? Do you think that by the time that she will be working, that the conditions will have changed and will be better for women, or will she maybe be forced to leave her field of work because she will find that she cannot live this with her family or with her situation?
Very, very relevant question. And I fully agree with you that the aviation sector is undergoing now huge change and challenges. I'm not necessarily recommending young girls to embrace the piloting position. I think renewable energy is a much more offering sector than this specific profession, or even compared with the aviation as a sector. This was the profession that my older daughter chose, and I have fully supported her throughout the challenges. Nevertheless, she has a double background. She's also an aerospace engineer, so she could be backing off at any time, resorting to working as an engineer, and she actually works as a maintenance engineer at the moment. Yes, I'm fully recommending girls to embrace the engineering career. At the moment, only 27% are working in the field, and we know that situation in whichever segregated sector changes only by having more women. So just having more women working in the sector, then conditions will be improved, work-life balance, less discrimination, less harassment, more possibilities to advance in decision-making positions. So I hope you did not get that I am encouraging all girls to become pilots. I just wanted to raise as a point how small is the percentage of girls that are working in the field, women, in this profession.
Thank you. Pilot or astronaut, as we know now. Ich switche ganz kurz ins Deutsch, weil ich das nochmal interessant fand an Ihrer Frage, dass ich glaube, wir würden nie auf die Idee kommen, zu einem Jungen zu sagen, überleg dir das nochmal, ob du den und den Job machen willst, ob du dann das später mit deiner Familie vereinen kannst. Also da wären wir wieder voll im Thema drin, aber ich verstehe Ihre Frage natürlich. Ich darf mich ganz herzlich bedanken. Vielen, vielen herzlichen Dank, Alexandrina Satnoianu, für Ihren Vortrag. Thank you for being with us. Und
Thank you as well.
Und wir machen hier gleich weiter. Es gibt eine kurze Pause und um 14 Uhr geht es dann weiter und zwar mit den angeblich natürlichen Geschlechterrollen, mit der natürlichen Geschlechterordnung, in Anführungszeichen, natürlich auf dem Arbeitsmarkt mit Markus Teunert. Jetzt können Sie dann nochmal das klischeefreie Sofa besuchen mit den tollen Gesprächsgästen, auf dem Markt der Lösungen vorbeischauen und vor allen Dingen, falls Sie es noch nicht gemacht haben, es erscheint gleich ein QR-Code in der Pause, da können Sie gerne auch Ihr Feedback hinterlassen. Dann eine gute kleine Pause, bis später um 14 Uhr.